Good afternoon and welcome to the first in our series of webinars on our Ireland is hiring campaign. In 2018, we started a concerted effort to attract Irish people back home who'd moved abroad, basically to come home for work. And since then, we've attracted many people home in sectors such as construction, manufacturing, IT, finance, healthcare, nursing, sales and marketing. And as part of that campaign, our recruitment team visited Sydney, Melbourne and Brisbane to undertake a series of career events for Irish people. And we actually sponsored a hurling match in Sydney between Kilkenny and Galway. As part of the trip, we met over 1,000 Irish workers out there between the three cities, and a couple of recruiters were looking to actually stay out there and weren't looking to come home at all. But we eventually got them back. But it was a huge success for us at the time. We had a free flight initiative, which will be actually part of this Ireland hiring campaign as well, to, pay for people's flights home. And that, as I say, will be part of this campaign as well. Afterwards, though, I suppose the GAA contacted us to see if we could build on the success of this, and we talked to them for about 6 months, well, nearly a year in total actually, but and in the last 6 months we've agreed to partner with the GAA for their next 3 years on the GAAGO streaming service they have for hurling and football matches for the county championship for the next 3 years. GAAGO is basically the streaming service for GAA worldwide. Viewers in over 80 countries. So you have thousands of people watching matches in right from Sydney through to Abu Dhabi, San Francisco, New York, Tokyo, and people also sign up when they're going on holidays for day passes to watch specific matches, county championship matches. We kicked off the partnership a couple of weeks ago with a launch in Croke Park, and look, it's just really fits really well with what we do, and I suppose our key thing is to try and promote Ireland and abroad in terms of a place to work for Irish people to return home. So as part of the initiative, the Ireland is Hiring initiative, we started to look and see who could, I suppose, we work with as an ambassador for the initiative, in terms of players that would resonate not only just as a player, but really just has had that experience of living and working abroad effectively and playing abroad, and I suppose we has been successful in different corners of the world, and we came up with Tommy Walsh, All-Ireland winner from Kerry and successful AFL and Aussie rules player, and Tommy will act as brand ambassador for the 2020 championship campaign for our FRS Recruitment Ireland is Hiring campaign. Welcome, Tommy. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. You're grand. So we'll come on to sort of, I suppose, the initiative and what we're doing later on. But just to talk a bit about your own sort of playing career, and we'll move into your sort of professional career later on. But I suppose you started out in Tralee. Obviously, you're from a famous Kerry football and family. I think your dad played, didn't he, for Kerry, and as a number of All-Ireland members?
Yeah, my dad was part of that Kerry team during the 70s and 80s. He won some All-Ireland medals, including a 4 in a row, which up to last year had been obviously one of the most successful teams. Obviously, that was surpassed by Dublin. But look, it was great to grow up around that. I got to know some of the guys that he played with, and to hear all the stories of the games and they played in the trips they went on. It kind of gave me a real thirst for Kerry GAA and to try and emulate somewhat what they had achieved.
Yeah, not a lot to live up to then, was it? Sort of 7 All-Irelands, 4 in a row.
Yeah. Well, look, it's obviously going to be tough to emulate that, but they were an extraordinary team. They had real leaders in every part of the pitch. There was a video here, Kerry Golden Years, that we watched a lot growing up. So my father didn't feature in a lot. It was more Owen Liston and Jack O'Shea and these.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Look, it was great to see, and again to grow up around that, and to be I suppose, get first-hand experience into those guys. You know, it was great.
And did you? So you obviously played underage locally there. Who did you play for locally in Tralee? Was it?
Yeah, so my local club here is Kerry in Tralee, so it's a big enough club in the town. You know, there would have been a number of Kerry players on the Kerry side when I was growing up. So you know, they gave me a great education in football, I suppose. Growing up, there was great coaches there, great people around. You know, and it's going around that type of environment was you know, I was very lucky to have that. They're a good club. I'm still playing them today, so it's you know, it's still good to be around those people.
Yeah. So you broke into the Kerry team when you were about 17, was it? Were you roughly?
Yeah, when I came out of minor, I was 19 going into the squad, so I was just coming into a very successful Kerry team at that stage. They had already a couple of All-Irelands under their belt, and I came in 2007 on the squad, and I didn't feature a lot that year, but we were lucky enough to win the All-Ireland at the end of it. So, and again, it was just being around the guys that were involved at that time: Colin Cooper, you know, Kieran Donaghy, Declan O'Sullivan, the three O'Shea brothers. Those type of guys, you know, again, it was an extraordinary group of players, and probably the best group of players that Kerry had seen since my father's time. So I was very lucky to be involved with them. You know, it was tough going and training every night. You were always playing on high quality players, so it probably developed me much quicker than I might have done if I had been involved at that stage.
Very good. And so if you go back to sort of 2009, and that was your sort of championship winning season, wasn't it? So you've sort of gone through a campaign, and I think you played in the final. Did you score a couple of points in the final? I think did you?
Yeah, a couple of points in the final. Yeah, we beat Cork, our neighbours, and you know, it was good. They'd beaten us early in the Munster Championship, so it was good to get one back over them later in the year. And my mother's from Cork actually, so I have a lot of family. I wouldn't say my allegiances were split. It was obviously great to win it with Kerry, but you know, I was kind of slaying on the other side of it too.
Very good. So, like, when you, I suppose, you come out and, you know, it must be an unbelievable experience to win in All-Ireland. Is it, like, you know, and it's sort of the pinnacle of sort of where you came from and the history in Kerry, etc. So
absolutely, yeah, and Kerry have been a successful county down through the years, but you know, when you actually get to experience yourself, you know, it's huge, and I've grown up seeing it and wanting to do that myself. So to get the chance to be on the team that contributed to the win, you know, and you know, there's no better feeling when you're going back into your hometown with Sam Maguire, you know, with the lads on the open top bus, you're seeing all your family and friends around. You know, that was it was a great feeling, and I suppose I was so young. You know, you think it's going to continue to happen for the rest of your career, but that's obviously not the case. You know, you have to, when you do get lucky enough to win something like that, you know, you have to try and make the most of it.
Yeah. So you come away from that, and you know, I presume, I think some Australian rules teams had been in touch with you previously and that type of thing. But you know, how do you sort of weigh up that decision? Like, I feel, you know, I suppose, look, it's even, you know, when someone works for a company and someone comes tapping on their shoulder, it's a big thing. But when you've just won an All-Ireland with Kerry and you're probably looking ahead a few years and you're saying, like, this is fantastic, like, that must have been just an unbelievably, you know, I don't know whether a difficult decision or you know, like a lot to weigh up at that sort of young age of sort of 19 or 20, like. Yeah,
well, I'd always kept an eye on it because Ty Kennelly, who I would have known, Ty's father and my father played together, so I would have known Ty a small bit, and he was over in Australia playing with Sydney Swans at the time, so there used to be weekly highlight shows on the TV, so I'd always keep an eye on him, so I always had an interest in the game. And then it was around 2008 that the guys from the AFL started doing trials over here, and I started speaking to them. So the process actually started before 2009, but the time to go, because I wasn't getting old by any means, but if you're going to change a game, obviously the younger you do it, the better. So at the end of 2009, it was kind of now or never. So I had a chance to go over to Melbourne and play with St Kilda for 2 years. So I think when I was looking at the opportunity, I kind of said, look, it's always something I wanted to do. I wanted to play professional sport, and unfortunately, as great as the GAA is, you don't get the opportunity to play professionally over here. So that was probably the only way I was ever going to get to do it. So when the opportunity came, I just said if I didn't take it, it would probably be something that I would live to regret further down the line. So and I always, took it year by year. I said I'd go over for a year, see what happened, and that just kind of went on for 5 years really. Look, it was a great experience. I was delighted I did it. It's a tough environment as any high level profession or sport is, so it was. I found out a lot about myself over there. There was good and bad times, but I think overall it was a good experience, and I'm glad I did it.
Were you in college here when you left then, or what was your?
I completed 2 years of college before I left. I was in Limerick, and fortunately the college allowed me to continue doing my studies over there remotely. So they were able to facilitate it. It wasn't always easy, and the grades weren't the best, but I was do it actually.
You were doing construction originally, was this? Or?
Yeah, I was in construction management, yeah.
Right, okay. That had probably around 2009, I suppose construction wasn't going fantastically well
either.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So just in terms of for a young guy landing into sort of Melbourne, was it completely? Obviously, you were full-time training and that type of thing once you got over there, were you? Or?
Yeah, it was pretty much back to the day I arrived. The pre-season starts around October, November, so you've a really a block of 6 or 7 or 8 weeks before Christmas of tough training. So I suppose I had to deal with that, and then just trying to find my feet. Obviously, you're in the other side of the world. You're trying to find a place to stay. Get yourself set up. Trying to connect with people, Irish people in the area. And in fairness to the club, they were very helpful with that. They do everything they can, but they have other players as well that they have to try and look after. So you do have to be somewhat self-sufficient and trying to get yourself set up. But once you get over that and you get into the first couple of weeks of training, you just kind of go with the flow then, and it becomes a bit easier. And it's just about getting through the next day's training and trying to improve. And I suppose because I was coming from a different game, I had a lot of catching up to do with the other guys, obviously. So the first couple of weeks I was just in the club pretty much all day, every day, just trying to get as much knowledge, get as much practice as I could to try and get to a level where I could start playing the games after Christmas.
Was there any level of homesickness, like we hear about sort of soccer players going abroad and that type of thing? Initially, was it tough initially, or?
It was, yeah. That's probably something I struggled with through the whole thing. I always couldn't wait to get back home, and I was lucky because of the Christmas break and the break at the end of the season. I was able to get home twice a year, which I know a lot of people abroad don't get that opportunity. So from that perspective, I was very lucky. But it was hard. Look, I was I'm very close to my family. I have a good group of friends around here, and next thing, all that is pretty much gone. With social media nowadays, it's probably a bit easier to contact people. But when I went firstly, that wasn't necessarily there. So it was tough, and it was something that I struggled with. But look, you just put the head down and work as hard as you can. And as I said, because I was getting home, I didn't have to wait that long before I knew I was going to be back in Ireland again.
Very good. How do they, in terms of the setup, is it similar to I suppose a Premier League team in soccer? You have a manager. Is that who calls the shots, or is there like a coach and staff, or how does it work over there?
Yeah, it's very similar to GAA in that you have a manager or a coach, and then you have assistant coaches or selectors. So when I went over first, you would have been, obviously I was a development player, we'll say. So you have under the coach and the assistant coaches, you have development coaches. So the younger guys will be working a lot more with them to try and develop themselves as quickly as possible to get up to the senior level. So, they would have assigned the guys specifically to me because I was obviously an outlier and I hadn't played the game before. So I was spent a lot of time with that coach, just working day and just watching vision of the games, trying to get a feel for it. But yeah, it's a similar setup. Obviously, it's professional and there's more people around. but it's more so similar to GA than it would be, say, soccer.
Yeah. How many's in the squad out there? Is it a much bigger squad then, or?
Yeah, you'd have, well, I suppose nowadays the GA squads are up around 40 something as well, but you'd have a squad of about 45. And then 22 play each week, and then if you're not in the 22 and you're not injured, you're playing in the reserves league, I suppose, which would be the EFL or the New South Wales league.
And actually, we're running a bit of a poll just for anyone who's tuning in there down the bottom of your screen there. Who will win the 2020 All-Ireland Football Championship? Kerry, Dublin, Mayo or Tyrone? We couldn't come up with any other teams that we thought would be in with a chance there. I see some viewers here on from Cork giving out about us not putting in Cork, and someone talking about Carlow, but sure, look, we're not sure about Carlow getting in there, Miriam, this year, but just in terms of the I suppose the intensity when you got over there from a media perspective, was it similar to here, like in terms of, obviously I suppose Kerry football would be in the spotlight, probably during the summer months, and obviously you're probably in a bit of a spotlight anyway, and particularly in Kerry. But when you go to somewhere like Melbourne and AFL, is it similar or is it more intense? Or
it's probably more intense because it's professional, and there's I think that was one of the first things they told me when I got there, that there was more journalists covering AFL than there actually was AFL players. So
yeah,
they could be a bit intrusive at times. They're reporting on stuff that might necessarily have to do with football. Which, in fairness to the journalists here, it doesn't have a lot. They stick to on-field matters. When they're reporting on things, but it was fairly intense. And not so much on me, obviously, because I was, I obviously wasn't on the team at that stage, but for more high-profile guys, and especially in Melbourne, because there's 18 teams and 10 of them are based in Victoria. So the Melbourne and the Melbourne media would be, and there's such a thirst for there. People are absolutely obsessed with it. It's a great game. They love the similar to the soccer, when you're transferred, they have trade periods over there, so all those things. So even when the football isn't going on, there's a lot of other stuff in the background that can be reported on also. So it is a year-round industry for reporting.
Yeah, and in terms, look, just basic stuff in terms of, obviously it's more of it's a sort of a bigger pitch. You've obviously got a different shaped ball to contend with. Like, did that take you long to sort of get to grips with, or?
Yeah, it did because it's completely, while I suppose the fundamentals of the game are the same, you have to keep the ball through some posts, but there's a lot of, obviously, with the tackling the ball, the pitch, the length of the game. The game is twice as long as a club game here, so it's pretty intense, and it takes you a while to get the body ready for that.
I suppose they have marks as well, don't they? So you can take marks.
Yeah. So they're kind of coming into Gaelic football now, but it's look, it's a good game, and it did take me a while to get used to it. I remember my first game when I came in at halftime, I was thinking, how am I going to do this all over? I had just played a full GAA game time-wise, and I was going to go out and play another one. So, it is a pretty physically intense game.
So I presume the training reflected that, did it, over time? You're sort of doing a huge amount of work, and
yeah. And look, when you're full time, you have the opportunity to do that. You can prepare better for training sessions. You can train for longer, train harder, and then recover better for the next training session. And that's probably something that GA players struggle to contend with, because there's a couple of other upper balls in the air, whether it be work, college, different things like that. You have those to contend with, as well as your training. So while it is over there, it's full on, it's full time. It can actually found over here tougher, because you're trying to deal with other things that you wouldn't necessarily have to have dealt with when you're a full time professional player.
Yeah, of course, yeah. So had you your time in Melbourne, was it for you? Was it a highlight, do you think, of your sort of career, or
Yeah, well, I was in Melbourne for 2 years, and then I was traded up to the Sydney Swans in my third year, so I spent 3 years up in Sydney, and it was great to see both cities and live in both cities, and I got to meet a lot of people in both. Obviously, there's huge Irish communities in both Melbourne and Sydney, so I was very lucky from that perspective, and that I got to live in two great cities. But certainly it was, there were highlights. I wouldn't say it was the absolute highlight, but because there was a lot of lows as well. I suffered with injury and sickness and different things. So it's, I really enjoyed my time over there. It was, as I said, there was a lot of good times, but a lot of low times too. And I think anyone that's away from home will experience those, whether it be through work or just missing home in general. So it's, I was no different from that perspective.
And as culturally, is there much of a difference between Melbourne and Sydney? Did you find them, like obviously Sydney's probably a bigger city typically, is it, or so?
Not really. If you're asking Sydney or Melbourne person, I'm sure they'd say there is, but from someone coming in from the other side of the world, there isn't a huge difference. They're both, and Australians are very similar to Irish people. Like the sense of humour is
they tell terrible jokes, Tommy. Terrible. Absolutely terrible.
Look, it is pretty similar. Obviously, the weather's a bit different, but I think they have. And I think any Irish person that's been out there will tell you that they like Irish people. They realise that we're a hard-working bunch of people. When we go over there to contribute to society, get involved in different things, and I think they appreciate that about the people that go over there.
Yeah, I think we like the feedback we get definitely is when we've actually placed people out there or people who go out there, we seem to be really, respected from a work perspective. I think work ethic is a really key sort of feedback you get from out there, and Irish people do seem to have been a great success when they go out,
Yeah, and it's I think in my time over there, I obviously went just at the start of the recession back in 2008, 2009. So at that time there was thousands of people coming over every single week. So it's from the time I started to the end of my 5 years, the Irish population that would have multiplied, I'd imagine. So it was each year you could see more and more people, and then it was great for me. I was delighted to see Irish people coming over because the Irish.
I suppose you were fairly recognisable as well at sort of 6'5" and that yeah.
It was great, and if I was able to help at any stage, I would like to think that I did, and I know because I know when I went over there and the Irish people that I was getting contact, they always went over the way to help me.
So obviously you moved to Sydney, and I presume from just a club perspective was a similar setup. And was Ty Kennelly in Sydney when you went there, or?
He was there, yeah, but he had just retired.
All right.
Retired from playing, so I never actually got to play with him over there. But he was still involved, kind of around the club. He was working for the AFL at the time, so I was obviously quite close to him. I played with him in 2009 with Kerry, so. It was great to have him there. I lived pretty close to him. I was able to pop over, to him and his family. So he was, I suppose, having made the transition from Melbourne to Sydney a bit easier. When at the club, he was able to go down and introduce me to people and show me the spots around Sydney. Yeah,
obviously, quite a lot of Irish, footballers go out to Australia. Why do you think, more don't make it at the highest level? Or is there anything that sort of stands out there? Do you think is sort of?
It's probably just it's just the transition. It's a different game. You might have guys that have been excellent Gaelic footballers and not as transitioned as well as others. But it's because it is a different game. But you see the guys that are there at the moment. I would say that there has never been a time where there's been more Irish guys playing, like the likes of Mark O'Connor from Kerry, Zach Toohey from Laois, Conor McKenna. There's all those guys. They're not only are they playing, but they're really top men in their own teams. Exactly. So, Pierce Hanley is over there. He's an extraordinary career. He's played over 150 games, and there's guys coming through. There's Joyce and St Kilda. There's a couple of other guys that aren't too far away either. So I'm not sure is it that Irish guys are going over better prepared, or they probably adapted their coaching a bit. But it's it's great to see those guys playing on their teams and being very valuable members of those teams also.
Yeah, potentially, like I presume, potentially as probably in the last 20 years, we've really seen a sort of an increase in we won't call it professionalism, but the whole professional outlook on GAA and how it's approached in terms of training and fitness and conditioning and etc. And even, I suppose, the mental side of it now is even sort of and diet, and that probably has a huge impact on it as well. So it's,
yeah, I think like a lot of the strength and conditioning guys here, I think they probably would look at Australia as an example. I know Australia would be seen as one of the better countries from that perspective. So a lot of the methods and practices over there are being passed back to here. I know we're doing things here that I would have done in Australia a couple of years ago. So it is increasing all the time. And obviously, look, with GA, there has to be a limit, because at the end of the day, it is an amateur game, and there's only so much you can do in regards to time. And you need to, because there's other things going on in your life as well, and there needs to be almost a cap on that, because you need to give guys an opportunity to go on and develop professionally and personally, and not just develop as great footballers or others.
Yeah. So basically, you started. You were with Sydney for 3 years, wasn't it? And I think you got an injury at that point. Did you, in the third year?
In my second year, I tore my hamstring tendons off the bone. I was playing a game against Essendon, so I just reached down for the ball, my knee locked, and just I felt the snap at the back of the leg. So at the time, I didn't realise how serious it was, but they weren't long, So I was into surgery by the end of next week, and pretty much was in rehab for a year after that. So I missed the full 12 months of football.
Yeah. Did you get to come home at all during that period, or?
I didn't actually, but it just so happened that my parents it was about a week after I got injured that my parents actually were coming to come to Australia. So for that, I may have gone home, but they were over, and I think the British and Irish Lions were playing Australia at the time, so I was able to go to a couple of those games. So I was able to do a few things that I wouldn't have been able to do had I not been injured. Obviously, you prefer not to be injured, but it was good to spend that time with my family too.
Yeah, it must be a very tough time, is it? I always wondered about sort of professional sports people, during that sort of injury period, you're not able to do anything. Obviously, you're in recovery, and that it must be really challenging psychologically, mentally, as well as sort of everything else. Like,
yeah, well, I think initially with when you do get injured, you're obviously you're devastated, but when it happens initially and you get whatever diagnosis, you're probably very positive, because you're going to say, I'm going to work really hard and quicker than anybody's gotten back before from this injury. But it's only when you get a couple of months into it, you realize this isn't going to happen quickly. The progress is slow. You're doing really tedious exercises to try and get your strength or your range back or whatever else, and that's probably the toughest time. And it's no different in GA. When you get injured and you're away from the playing squad, you almost feel that you're invisible, because to the head coach and the assistant coaches, if you can't contribute on the field, well, then you're no good to them, really. So your interaction with them goes down and everything. So it is being injured is tough, but you just have to put the head down and try and get back as quick as you can.
Yeah, and I've read, I suppose, in soccer, and that the managers don't necessarily want you around the place either. Like from in case well, obviously there's potential for people to take it negatively, and you know what I mean, sort of. But did the club support you at all during that period? Like, or how does that work? Like on a day-to-day basis, or?
Oh, well, you do it. Like, you have your strength and conditioning guys that are purely assigned to injured players. So I would have worked very closely with them for that period, and. In a sense, I was probably lucky that it happened to me over there, because I was able to work full time at getting it right, and it allowed me to get back to some level of playing football again, and to be back to playing GAA, because had it happened in Ireland, for example, and I was when I was in college, I was working, and I wasn't able to dedicate as much time as I did to it. It might have been different, and I might have gotten to the level where I could play sport at that level again.
Yeah. Just for anyone who's watching there, there's a question bar on the right hand side of your screen. So any questions you have for Tommy, if you just stick them in that taskbar on the right hand side, and we'll try and get around to them in a little while. So then, I suppose, that decision to come home, Tommy, how did that sort of manage? Like, obviously, or what was the influences behind that? Or
There was a couple. I'd been there 5 years at that stage, and I was actually out of contract at the end of that year with Sydney. So, I wasn't 100% sure if they were going to re-sign me, or if I wanted to be on, if they were going to re-sign me, and if not, I was going to have to try and find another club. And because there's only two teams in Sydney, it would have meant moving cities again, more than likely.
Yeah.
So I think once I just weighed everything up, I felt I'd gotten to the level where I could play sport again. As I said, I had struggled with homesickness a lot during my time there. So, I just felt it was the right time. I was probably 26 at that stage, 25, 26. I wanted to get on with my life professionally too. I knew I was going to have to do something else when I came back to Ireland eventually, whether it be go back to college or do some type of professional exam or something like that. So I wanted to try and get that out of the way in my 20s rather than coming back.
Of course,
yeah. So there was a few things, but
how does that, just in terms of the decision-making process, like, when people, I suppose, whether it's moving from Kerry to Dublin or Cork to Limerick or whatever, people need to weigh up things. Have you any advice really for people in that decision-making process? Is there anything you did, or did you just think, right, I'm off next week or next month or whatever?
No, in fairness, I put a good bit of thought into coming home, and ultimately it mightn't have been my decision anyway. If I tried to stay on, I mightn't necessarily have been signed by another club, so it mightn't have been my decision in the end. But I waited up for a long period of time. I thought, if I did stay, what was I going to do? What was I going to try and do when I went home? And I was probably different from a lot of people in that I knew that when I went back to Ireland, I was going to be playing professional football. So basically, what I had experienced for the last 5 years, while there were certain traits of being a professional sportsman that do transfer to the professional environment in the workplace, obviously it's not something that you can go home and pick up.
Of course,
so there was a lot of different thoughts about what I was going to do, and I spoke to people close to me, people whose advice I valued both in Australia and Ireland, and ultimately came to the decision that it was probably time for me to come back.
All right. So, did you move straight back to Kerry, or did you go back to Kerry, or did you just go ahead somewhere else first? Or
yeah, I moved back to Kerry initially, but then I started work with EY, the professional services firm in Cork. So I moved to Cork. Then I was back in Ireland at the end of 2014. So I moved to Cork in early 2015 and started working with them.
And that was a new career, like that was effectively, you hadn't worked in that sector before, really, had your...
No, I went into the tax advisory there, so started from the bottom, did all the exams and all that, so I was there for about 3.5 years.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah. And were you in Cork City then, obviously, based
living in Cork City, and look, it's a leap of faith with me as well. I didn't have any, I had done a postgraduate in commerce in the University of Sydney while I was there, so that probably helped a little bit. But typically with those type of firms, they're looking at people who have done accountancy, finance degrees, and different things. So luckily enough, they took me on, and I just, as I said, I started at the very bottom in there, but look, I was very lucky to get that opportunity, and I'm grateful to them for that.
Yeah. Brilliant. And so just in terms of practical advice when you were coming back, I presume you didn't have masses of stuff to sort of send back in containers or any of that sort of stuff, did you? Or sort of...
When I packed, I had a big bag and I packed it as much as I could. But when I got to the airport, I realised that every kg I was over, they were going to charge me $100. So I found a bin in the corner of the airport instead of dumping stuff that I didn't need. So I went back the essentials.
Very good. So obviously, when you got back here, did you go straight back? Was it a year or two before you went back into the Kerry team, or was it a couple of years? Or
no, I went in pretty much straight away. I had been in contact with the management when we decided to come home late in 2014. I'd been in contact with them at that stage. They just won the All-Ireland in 2014, so they went away on their holiday, I think in January. So when they came back, I pretty much went in and joined the squad straight away.
So they were all coming back hungover, and you were fit as a flea. So it was...
yeah. Not kicked the ball in 5 years.
Very good. And obviously, then working up through the team. Well, obviously in the team and up onto the All Ireland final last year. So obviously you were living in Cork. Did you find that adjustment back, I suppose, and Sarah Fitzgerald asked this question just online there, transitioning back to an amateur player from being professional, was there any different? Well, obviously you were working at the same time, so that's a challenge in itself. So
yeah, it's actually something I found quite difficult because, as I said earlier, you do have a lot of time to prepare and to record from training sessions, whereas I was getting into the car with a couple of other guys that were living in Cork at the time. We were driving down. I was getting out of the car, having been in an hour and 15 minutes or whatever it is, trying to train, back in the car, back up to Cork, and then get up the next morning and try and do a full day's work. So obviously that wasn't something I was used to, and that probably took me a long while to get used to that, and it took my body a long while to get used to that because I was waking up way sore than I would have been. When I had the time to do those extra things. So, and then you're trying to fit in your own weight sessions and different things around that. So it was, that was actually much tougher than I thought it was going to be.
Of course, yeah. And obviously you guys went really, really close last year. What, looking back to, well, obviously there's massive difference, just probably a stupid question, but from 2009 to 2019, just the I suppose the pain of last year versus the ecstasy of 2009, is that difficult to come to terms with after the final last year? Or
it is, yeah, because I think your initial thoughts when you lose a game is, what could I have done? And I think when you play, even if you have the perfect game, there's some little thing that you would have done differently. If you had your time again. So, we missed a lot of opportunities in both games that we have taken. It could have been a different result, but all credit obviously goes to Dublin. They're an exceptional team, and they've proven that over the last 10 years. And if you give them any chance at all, if you don't bury them, they're never done. And they came back and drew with us in the first game, obviously, and then just probably had that extra little bit in the replay which got them over the line.
One of the things that I always sort of I wondered about Kerry was how do you keep producing fantastic players? Like, it's a relatively small county in terms of population. Obviously, there's a little bit of hurling down there, and that probably helps a little bit. But what is it? Is it just the sort of culture, do you think, or is it the coaches are brought up through the ranks, or what just makes and typically they're very, like, if you look at the Gooch or right the way back through the years, all these types of players who are very cultured sort of footballers and skillful and Kerry tend to play football in a particular type of way, like so what is it like? I always wondered about that.
I think it's just tradition, really. Like when I was no different when I was growing up, you looked to the Kerry senior team and you had a couple of players and you wanted to do what they were doing. You wanted to play for Kerry. You wanted to play in a certain way. When I was growing up, I always looked up to Maurice Fitzgerald. Now, I play nothing like Maurice Fitzgerald, but he was always something that someone that I looked up to. And when you saw how skillful he was, the way they carried themselves. And when those players were idolised in Kerry at the time, so I think it's natural for any young young boy or girl to be looking up at those people and want to get to that level as well. And Kerry, I suppose, has always produced good footballers, and then every so often you get the the exceptional ones like the Colin Coopers, Declan Sullivans. At the moment that there's David Clifford, obviously Sean O'Shea coming through. They're two guys that want to play for Kerry for a long time and be very successful. So, it is, I suppose, ultimately it just comes down to tradition. There is coaching there. The standard of football down here is very high. Guys have probably bought into the setup now at under 14 and under 14 and those development squads, which mightn't have happened previously. So they're being developed all the time. Yeah. So
did you play any other sports while you were growing up?
I played a bit of basketball. I played about under 16 at the football club. I played a bit of soccer as well, but my father told me to give that up as well. So I played a bit of golf. I'm terrible at golf, but it was mostly basketball and football, and basketball is a great sport for football because
It is, yeah.
obviously it improves your hands and your hand-eye coordination and your distribution skills as well, because you see things that second quicker, and you can get the ball over your hands that bit quicker.
Yeah, there's been a few decent Kerry basketball players along the way, hasn't there? Oh, yeah. In terms of just this year, look, we've obviously had since March. It's been unbelievably challenging for, I suppose, everyone in work and society. And that, how has it sort of affected you in terms of, obviously, the football championship has been put back, the county championship, and we've just kicked off really in the last month on the club championship. But what's that been like really since March? Or
yeah, it's been strange. I think when we broke up initially, we probably didn't realize it was going to be for as long. So I think we broke up around the middle of March, and we felt it was only going to be maybe for a month or 6 weeks. So we had our individual programs that we were going away to do, and I think at that stage it was probably something that we were looking forward to, because we were getting a break for a month or 6 weeks, which you'd never get in a normal season. But I suppose as the year dragged on and things got pushed back, and the uncertainty started to grow, it is tough to keep going, because you're kind of thinking, am I training for nothing or whatever else, and it's hard to keep yourself motivated. But I know that dates have been set now, so you just have to prepare as best you can for the middle of September, when training is scheduled to start again, and then the games are scheduled to start in October, and we've a lot of club games coming up to keep us going. So you just have to proceed as if that's the way it's going to go ahead. That's planned.
And what's your view? Like, there's a lot of talk around sort of, whether, obviously there's potentially we mightn't be able to have spectators at county games. To me, I wouldn't have been a big believer in it, but I suppose with the Premier League, they seem to make it work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And with, I think the club games, it seems to be working okay. What do you think, or in terms of county?
Yeah, look, obviously, it's not ideal. You want the crowds to be there. Like, I know with the finals last year, they were exceptional games, but the crowd obviously adds to that. But I think having games behind closed doors is better than the alternative of having nothing at all. I'd hate to see, when you're looking back through the records in years to come, that there was nothing happened during 2020. I'd like to see that there is going to be an All-Ireland Championship that teams are going to get to play. It has been restructured slightly in that it's not up now, so that will bring an extra layer of excitement to it. So, albeit the crowds mightn't be there, and hopefully at that stage there will be, you might get full stadiums, but there will be some ability to get a couple of thousand people in there, and then use facilities like GAAGO or whoever else are being streamed to watch them.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, well, I think that it's great that the technology is there, even at local club games, and clubs themselves streaming, lads running down the side of the field with an iPhone, almost streaming matches. It's been really interesting to see, actually. That the technology is there. Like, I think within our workplaces, we've obviously flipped into this sort of remote working thing. It's been really interesting to see that when needs arise, or it's needed to happen, that just everything seems to just flip into gear, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there is a huge interest, and it's not just necessarily from the people from that county. If there's a game of football on TV, people are going to watch it. The GAAGO just kind of started to get going when I was over in Australia, so it was great for me to be able to click in and watch games. You weren't going to go down to the nearest Irish pub at 11 o'clock at night to watch the game. You were able to get it on your laptop. So I think it's great. I know they're streaming games down here in Kerry. The county board are doing it, and there's been a big take up so far. So I think it is the way forward. Obviously, we still want crowds at the games, but if people can't get there, it's another option.
Yeah, well, I think people are sort of, funnily enough, the lockdown, or the sort of the restrictions have been really during the summer months. They're going to be pretty dark evenings and nights to have nothing to watch, really. Whether like it'd be something really for people to look forward to, I think, more than anything else. Just one or two questions. Dave from he's unfortunately he's a wounded Cork man, he says, and he's asking, who is the best Kerry player you played with and the best non-Kerry player you played against during your career? Be careful now on the first one, because you get a fair few kicks in training in next month.
I've spent a couple of years, but when I initially went in, the chance to play with Colin Cooper, I just think he was a different level to anything else that I'd seen. He pretty much had it all. He was a good ball winner, very smart in the ball, great finisher, good kicker of both feet, a leader of the team. Just to get to see him up close and see the way he operates, the way he processes his the game, the way he makes decisions. That was obviously I wouldn't have picked up too much from him, but I played, but he was exceptional.
Yeah. And a non-Kerry player you played against? Would you say?
Non-Kerry player. I think again when I went into when I started, we came up against the great Tyrone team of the Naughties, and they had a lot of exceptional players. But I know Peter Canavan's probably just going to the end of his career, but again to have played against him, and to see him operate, and to see how he was obviously a very talented footballer, but that Tyrone team, they were good footballers, but they were based on their game was physicality, they were great, and then if they could get the ball up to the likes of him, he was going to archer. So
he was a phenomenal player. All right, okay. Just on the poll, so unfortunately, Tommy, 40% of people think Dublin will win, 30% Kerry, 20% Mayo, God help us, whoever that is, and 10% for Tyrone. So, just Tommy, just to say a huge thank you for coming on today and giving up your time. For anyone watching, we'll be obviously I suppose we've started our partnership with the GAA and GAAGO, but it really kicks into gear in September. So we'll have lots of sort of events and giveaway stuff and that type of thing. We've just shot some videos down in Kerry, Galway, and Dublin, and we'll be releasing those from September onwards. Really exciting stuff we're doing. I'd like to thank Aaron Whittle, ironically from Melbourne, for setting up everything for us today. He's done a great job, and we will have the next installment where we'll be, I suppose, of our Ireland is Hiring series. We'll focus really on sectors and jobs available for people abroad, to Irish people abroad, to have a look at and apply to back home. We're partnering with lots of employers already around this, big, medium and small employers to attract people home. So we'll have a lot going on in the coming weeks and months. So thanks a million, Tommy. Good luck over the next few weeks in the club championship and into the county championship. We'll catch up with you soon, okay?
Thanks, Colin. Cheers.